It's taken me a long time to even think about writing this down. Honestly, a couple of years ago, I was really in a groove, early 30s, working remotely as a freelance editor and spending most afternoons at this little coffee shop downtown to actually work on my own novel. It was a pretty simple routine, and at the time everything felt perfectly normal, just life. But something from that period keeps circling back in my thoughts, and I figured maybe getting it out there would help. I kept going back to the coffee shop like an idiot. It was comfortable, the noise level was good for focusing, and honestly, it was the only place I could reliably get a decent latte, and the guy, he was always there. Not always, but almost usually in the same booth, tucked away in the back corner. I started noticing him a couple of weeks after the staring incident. It wasn't the staring anymore. Not exactly. He wasn't looking at me, not directly. He had a laptop open, and he'd be typing furiously, constantly, like genuinely frantic typing, and every so often. And this is the part that really started to get under my skin. He'd glance up, not at me, but at my laptop screen. Just a quick flick of the eyes, then back down to his keyboard. I figured he was a student, maybe, working on some kind of assignment, and I happened to be in his line of sight. It was a small shop, after all. I tried to angle my screen away, subconsciously, but it felt ridiculous. Like I was being paranoid. I even started bringing a physical notebook, thinking maybe if I wasn't using my laptop, he'd leave me alone. That didn't make a difference. He was still typing, still glancing. One afternoon I was working on a particularly intense scene, a confrontation between two characters, and I felt this prickling on the back of my neck. I looked up, and he was looking directly at my screen, his fingers flying across his keyboard. The speed was unsettling. It wasn't just fast, it was like he was copying something. It was probably just a coincidence. People type fast, right? But the timing, it was too close. It was like he was translating what I was writing in real time. I started rearranging my routine. Not dramatically, just subtle shifts. Different days for the coffee shop, different times. I even tried working from the library a couple of times, but it felt too exposed, too public. The coffee shop, for all its weirdness, had the back corner. I could at least see him. Yesterday, I was working on a scene where my protagonist is being followed. It was a really claustrophobic bit, with lots of shadows and quick glances over the shoulder. I was really getting into it, trying to capture that feeling of being hunted, and I felt it. Not in the story, but behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I just kept typing, trying to act normal, but I could feel his gaze. When I finally did look, he wasn't just typing. He was sketching in a small notebook. I couldn't make out what it was, but the angle of his head and the way he was holding the pencil mimicked the posture of the character I was writing about, the guy being followed. Okay, that was unsettling. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe he was an art student and my character just happened to be standing in a similar pose, but I started to feel paranoid again. I quickly saved my work, packed up my laptop, and went for a walk around the block. I figured a little fresh air would clear my head. I took a longer route back, cutting through the alley behind the coffee shop. It's usually pretty quiet, mostly just delivery guys. But as I turned the corner, I saw him, standing by the back door, looking directly at me. He wasn't sketching anymore. He just stood there, then quickly went back inside when he saw me. It was like he was waiting for me. Maybe he needed something? Maybe he wanted to ask me about my writing? It felt wrong. I didn't go back inside, not right away. I stood on the sidewalk trying to decide what to do. Call the police? For what? A guy sketching and staring. It felt ridiculous. I just wanted to finish my chapter. But the thought of him being in there, knowing what I was writing before I even finished the sentences, it made my skin crawl. I went to my car, fumbling with the keys. That's when I saw it. My messenger bag, the one I always take to the coffee shop with my notebook and the flash drive, the one with the entire novel on it. It wasn't on my shoulder. I hadn't noticed dropping it. Panic spiked. I looked around, scanning the sidewalk, then back towards the alley. Nothing. I raced back to the coffee shop, practically pushing the door open. He was there, same table, typing. He didn't even look up. and sitting on the edge of his table right next to his coffee cup was my bag. I walked towards him, trying to sound calm. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I think that's mine." He finally looked up, his eyes, they were so intense, and he was smiling, a slow, deliberate smile. He didn't say anything, just picked up the bag and handed it to me. As he did, I saw the notebook open on his table. It wasn't sketches anymore, it was transcriptions. Exact lines from my novel, the scene I was writing yesterday, the one I hadn't shown anyone. Then, the bell above the door chimed. A delivery guy, struggling with a large box, bumped into me hard, knocking me off balance. I stumbled backwards, dropping my coffee. Hot liquid splashed across my hand. It was a mess, a distraction. When I looked up, the man was gone. His table was empty. My bag was still in my hand, but the notebook vanished with him. I just stood there, staring at the empty table, coffee dripping from my hand, feeling like I'd just walked into someone else's nightmare. Maybe he was some kind of obsessive fan, and this was just a really twisted way of showing his appreciation. It didn't feel like appreciation. I went back to the coffee shop the next day. Stupid, I know, but I had to. I needed to see if he'd left the notebook. Just left it on the table like some kind of weird offering. It was empty, of course, cleaned, but I lingered, nursing a tea, scanning the faces. Nothing. Just the usual morning crowd. Students, remote workers, a few older guys reading newspapers. I tried to ask the barista, the one with the nose ring, if she'd noticed anyone unusual yesterday. Just the delivery guy, honestly. He was a mess. That was it. She hadn't seen him, hadn't noticed anything. I felt ridiculous, describing him, trying to explain the transcriptions. She probably thought I was losing it. Then, this afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice, very official. She said she was Detective Miller from the Major Crimes Unit. She asked if I knew a Samuel Harding. I said no, but then she started talking about a string of incidents. Burglaries, she called them, targeted. Specifically homes of people involved in a clinical trial. She said my name came up because I was listed as a participant. A trial for a new anxiety medication. I vaguely remembered signing something, a consent form. It was a long shot, a last resort after my publisher started pushing for a faster turnaround on the book. They'd suggested something to help with the pressure. She didn't say what was stolen from the other homes, just that they were looking for Harding and believed he might be disrupting the study. She said I should be careful, that's all. Careful. It wasn't about the book, was it? It was about this trial. He wasn't a fan. He was connected to the other participants. Maybe he thought we were being exploited, that the medication was dangerous. That felt right somehow. A misguided activist trying to expose something. It still didn't explain the transcriptions, but it felt less personal, less terrifying. I checked the news. A small article buried on page 6. Local homes targeted in apparent burglaries. The article mentioned the clinical trial, the anxiety medication, and a warning to participants to be vigilant. But it didn't mention Samuel Harding. It didn't mention anything about why they were targeted. And that's when the cold started deep in my chest. It wasn't about stopping the trial. It was about something else entirely. Something they didn't want anyone to know. It's been years. I still take the medication, though, not because it helps with the writing, it helps with the looking. I haven't been back to that coffee shop, obviously, not even driven past it. It's not a conscious decision exactly. It's just not a route I take. And I avoid cafes in general, really, anywhere with that specific kind of light, that low hum of conversations. It feels like being watched, even when I know I'm alone. I tried to rationalize it for a long time. I thought maybe Harding was just obsessive, fixated on my work, and the burglaries were a misguided attempt to get my attention. Some twisted fan theory playing out in real life. It sounded insane even as I thought it, but it was easier than the alternative. Easier than believing someone was deliberately dismantling the trial, hurting people. Detective Miller called a few times after that. She said they were updates. They picked him up eventually. They found a lot of things. She never specified what. Just said it was enough to keep him occupied for a long time. She never explained the transcriptions either. She didn't seem to think they were relevant. I finished the book eventually. It wasn't any good. I knew it wasn't any good. It felt tainted, like I'd written it for him. I haven't published anything since. I still see him sometimes in crowds, or I think I do. A similar build, the same intense focus. It's probably just my imagination, but I always check the hands. He had these unusually long fingers. I still find myself glancing at people's hands. It's ridiculous. The thing I can't do anymore, not without feeling that coldness again, is offer help. If someone drops something, struggles with a door, anything, I used to automatically reach out. Now I just walk past. I tell myself it's self-preservation, but it feels like something else. It feels like I already gave enough, and I still don't know what he wanted with the pages. It's taken me a long time to even think about writing this down, honestly. A couple of years ago, I was really in a groove. Early 20s, first job out of college, same everything every day. I'd take the 7:15 bus, grab a coffee at the shop near the office, and settle in for a pretty standard workday. It was so consistent, and at the time, that felt really good. But looking back, it feels like a setup for something I didn't see coming. The next few days were normal, I guess. Or as normal as things could be after that bus incident. I kept switching seats, avoiding eye contact with anyone, just trying to blend. It felt stupid, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then on Wednesday, I saw her again, not on the bus, but walking the same way as me, from the stop to the office. I almost didn't recognize her at first. Just a woman in a gray coat, the same height, similar build, but then she turned her head and it was the same face, the same intensity in her eyes. I sped up, told myself I was just being paranoid, that it was a coincidence. It's a big city, right? Lots of people, but she matched my pace. She didn't look at me, not directly. It was more like she was looking through me, or at the space just beside me. It was unsettling. I took a different turn, cutting through the little park, thinking I could lose her, and I did, for 1 block. But when I came out onto Elm Street, there she was across the road, still walking with me. I started to feel foolish, like I was in a bad movie. Maybe she worked in the same building, maybe she was just going the same direction. People share commutes. It's logical. I even started rehearsing a casual, small world, in my head, just in case. I almost said something when she paused at the crosswalk, right in front of me, but she didn't look up. She just stood there, waiting for the light, staring straight ahead. And I noticed she was carrying a small, worn, leather-bound book. It looked old, and she was clutching it so tightly, her knuckles were white. That's when the small world thought just died. I started taking the stairs instead of the elevator. 12 flights. Brutal, especially with the suit. But it felt better, more control. I'd scan the lobby before leaving each night, looking for the gray coat. She wasn't always there, which made it worse. Like she was letting me think I'd gotten away with something. Then, last Tuesday, I saw her getting into the elevator. I froze on the 5th step and just watched the doors close. I waited for the next one, my heart hammering. When I got to the lobby, she was gone, vanished. I told myself she must have gone to a different floor, maybe to a client meeting. People do that. But then on Wednesday, I decided to walk a different way home, a longer route, completely avoiding the bus. I walked along Market Street, then cut over towards the river. I felt good, like I'd outsmarted her. And then I saw her, not walking, but standing outside O'Malley's, that Irish pub a few blocks from my apartment. She was just watching it. It wasn't even on my route. Why would she be there? Maybe she was meeting someone. I quickened my pace, trying to look like I wasn't noticing. I kept my head down, focused on my phone, and pretended to be on a call, and then I looked up, and she was across the street. She hadn't moved, just appeared, and that's when I saw the book again. She was flipping through it slowly, deliberately, as if she was checking something. It wasn't just a book, it was like a directory, a list, and the way she was looking around wasn't random. She was looking for someone. I don't know why, but I felt like she wasn't looking for me specifically. I thought maybe she's a private investigator or a researcher, a really strange, creepy researcher. It felt contained, like it had a reason, like I wasn't the target just nearby. The pub was quieter than usual. Mid-afternoon, yes, but still, Old Man Hemmings was never quiet. He usually has the football on, shouting at the screen. Today, just music, Irish folk, low, and most of the tables were empty. I figured it was a slow day. I needed a pint, though, just to calm down. I sat at the bar, and the bartender, Mary, gave me a funny look. "Rough day, love?" "Just a bit," I said, and then I saw her. Through the window, standing on the pavement, the gray coat blending into the overcast sky. The book, always the book. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore, just watching. Mary followed my gaze. Now that's a regular. She comes in here sometimes, asks about the history of the building. She says it used to be a boarding house, a bit odd but harmless enough. A boarding house? That explained the book? Old records? Tenants? Maybe she was doing genealogy? It felt less terrifying, a little pathetic even. I waved at Mary, ordered another pint, and tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Then a man came in, not Hemmings, someone I'd never seen before. He walked straight to her, through the door, and started talking. Quietly, too quietly to hear, and she handed him something, a page torn from the book. He glanced at it, then looked straight at me. He started walking towards the bar, not casually, purposefully. And his hand was inside his coat. It wasn't a friendly walk, it was predatory. I didn't think. I just pushed off the stool, knocking over my pint, and bolted for the back exit. The alley smelled like stale beer and something worse. I didn't stop running until I hit the main street, my heart hammering, a shard of glass digging into my heel from the spilled pint. I looked back. They were gone, both of them. But the alley, the back door was open. It had been locked when I went in. I went to the police, of course. The next morning, I explained about the woman, the pub, the man, and the open door. They were polite and asked a lot of questions, mostly about whether I'd had anything to drink, which, okay, fair. I told them about the boarding house history and how she was researching it. They took notes. A young constable kept looking at his watch. They went to the pub. Hemmings hadn't seen anything unusual, apparently. He said the woman was a regular, a bit odd, and always reading. The man, he'd never seen him before. The back door was definitely locked when he closed up. He was adamant about that. He said I must have imagined it being open, imagined it. I started looking into the boarding house myself. I searched old newspaper archives online. It was called the Gables. It closed down in the 1950s. Nothing scandalous, just unremarkable. There were a few minor incidents, mostly lost pets and arguments between tenants. Then I found a probate record. The owner, a woman named Eleanor Vance, had no family. Everything went to a solicitor with a familiar name. Bartholomew and Finch, the firm that handled the sale of my flat. The firm that introduced me to the estate agent. The firm that knew everything about my life before I even told them. It's a coincidence, I told myself, a big one, but still, lots of firms handle probate. Lots of people use the same solicitors, but then I remembered when I signed the paperwork for the flat, Mr. Finch had asked me about my commute, specifically which route I took. It seemed harmless then, just making conversation. And I've seen her again. Not close, not like at the pub, just there, on the bus, across the street, always watching, always with that book. It's not following, I keep telling myself. It's just bad luck. But it doesn't feel like luck. It feels constructed like someone somehow is arranging things, and I'm the arrangement. I stopped taking the bus, completely. It wasn't a conscious decision, not at first, just detours, longer routes, walking more. Then I realized I hadn't boarded one in 2 weeks, and I hadn't seen her. Not once. It was unsettling in a different way. Before it was the constant low-level dread of knowing she was somewhere nearby. Now it was emptiness, like a phantom limb. The firm, Bartholomew Finch, sent a letter. An invitation, really. A small reception. To welcome new clients to the firm. It felt pointed. I almost went. Part of me thought maybe it was a way to clear the air, to ask some direct questions, to understand what was going on. But I couldn't. I just couldn't bring myself to walk into a room knowing they were expecting me. Now, I ask for everything in writing. Everything. No phone calls, no meetings. If anyone wants to discuss anything, it has to be documented. It's exhausting. I've lost a few potential research contacts. People don't like it. They say I'm difficult. Maybe I am. I think it's about control, actually. They took control of the narrative somehow before I even started. They knew where I lived. My routines, they set the stage. And that woman, she wasn't a threat in herself. She was a marker, a way of letting me know they were watching, a reminder. I haven't seen her in months, but I still look. Every time I'm in a crowd, every time I'm waiting for a train, and sometimes when I'm really tired, I swear I can feel her eyes on the back of my neck. It's probably just stress. Probably. But I check the reflections in windows anyway, always, and I always ask for it in writing. Even ordering a coffee, it feels safer, but it's also a lonely way to live, and still, I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something obvious. Something about the book she always carried. I never saw the title. Never. It's strange thinking about it now, almost 2 years later. I was 25, managing a little coffee shop on a pretty unremarkable street, and honestly, life felt stable. My days were filled with the usual, opening the shop, training new baristas, making small talk with regulars, and trying to perfect latte art. It didn't seem odd at the time, just a comfortable rhythm, but some things stick with you, even when they don't feel particularly significant at first. The next few days were normal, I guess. As normal as a coffee shop can be. I still saw him, the man who'd stared. He'd come in every afternoon, always around 2:30. Same order, black coffee, no sugar. He'd sit at the little table by the window, always facing the counter, and read. Always a thick, hardback book. Looked like history, maybe. I didn't pay much attention. Then he started asking questions. Not about the coffee, though. About me. Harmless things at first. How long have you been managing here? Do you live nearby? Just making conversation, I figured. A lonely guy, maybe. I answered politely, kept it brief. The questions got specific. Did you grow up around here? What did you study in college? He remembered details I'd mentioned in passing, things I barely recalled saying myself. It was unsettling, but I chalked it up to him being a good listener, an overly good listener. Then the first gift appeared. It was a small, antique snow globe, a miniature lighthouse with snow swirling around it. It was sitting on the counter where I usually stacked the pastry boxes, right when I unlocked the shop one morning. No note, just there. I asked the other barista, Ben, if he'd seen anyone, but he hadn't. I assumed it was a customer who'd left it by mistake, or maybe a weird, anonymous admirer. I put it on the little shelf behind the counter with the other knickknacks. It looked out of place. The next day, he was there, reading. He didn't mention the snow globe, didn't even look at it, but he did stare. A long, unwavering stare, and I instinctively reached for the lock, my hand hovering over the button before I even realized what I was doing. I just needed air. I told Ben I wasn't feeling well and left for the rest of the day. It was probably just a headache, I told myself. Stress. But the feeling, it was like I was being watched, even after I'd left the shop behind. I started taking the back way to work. It was just a couple of blocks longer, but it avoided passing his house. I hadn't even consciously registered where he lived until I realized I was walking directly past it every morning. A little blue Victorian, perfectly maintained, with a garden full of those fussy, old-fashioned roses. It wasn't a neighborhood he fit in, not really. Everyone else had beat-up pickups or sensible sedans. He drove a black BMW, always spotless. The snow globe, more things started appearing. A small, smooth river stone, a pressed fern in a plastic sleeve. They were always left somewhere subtle, tucked into the sugar caddy, nestled between the napkin dispensers. Little offerings. It was creepy, but almost thoughtful. I started thinking maybe he was lonely. Maybe this was his odd way of connecting. I felt bad, honestly. Then I saw him on my day off. I'd gone to the hardware store, needing potting soil for my apartment balcony. He was there, browsing the gardening section. He didn't say anything, just saw me. A quick nod. Then he went back to examining seed packets. It wasn't the seeing me that got me. It was why would he be at the hardware store on a Saturday afternoon? He didn't strike me as a gardening type. I started double-checking the locks on the shop, even though I knew I'd secured them. I rearranged the furniture, so I wasn't facing the windows for so long. Ben noticed. "You okay?" he asked, wiping down the espresso machine. "You seem jumpy." I just said it was the new health inspector coming next week. It sounded pathetic, even to me. Yesterday, I found a small, antique key on the floor near the back door. It wasn't a shop key, it wasn't a car key, it was just a key, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that it hadn't been left by accident. This wasn't loneliness. This wasn't thoughtfulness. This was something else, something deliberate. The back door rattled. It wasn't a loud bang, just a persistent testing rattle, like someone trying the handle gently, then a little harder. It was a slow Tuesday, with only a couple of people scattered around. Ben was in the back, grinding beans, the noise muffled enough that he wouldn't have heard it. I froze, staring at the door, my heart hammering. It stopped. I told myself it was the wind. We'd had some gusts the night before, but the latch held, and it wasn't windy now. I started walking slowly towards the door, wiping my hands on my apron, trying to look casual, like I was just going to sweep. Then I saw the envelope taped to the glass. It was thick manila, the kind you'd use for important documents. Inside was a photograph. Not of me, not directly. It was a picture of my apartment building, a clear shot taken from across the street showing my living room window, and taped to the back of the photo was a single, dried rose petal. I think I actually went cold. It wasn't aggressive. Exactly, it was documenting. Like he was keeping a record. Maybe he was a private investigator, a weird, obsessive one hired by an ex. It was the only thing that made any sense, a disturbed ex that had to be it. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911, but stopped halfway through. What would I even say? Someone took a picture of my apartment? They'd laugh. I hung up, feeling ridiculous. The bell above the door jingled. It was him. He walked in slowly, looking exactly as he always did. Polite, quiet. He didn't look at the envelope. He didn't look at me. He just went straight for the pastry case, studying the croissants like they were ancient artifacts. I felt a pressure in my chest, like I couldn't breathe. Ben came out from the back. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing my face. I shook my head, unable to speak. He started to say something, but the man at the pastry case suddenly turned, and our eyes met. Just for a second. And in that second I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he knew I'd seen the photo. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, like always. Ben made it for him, and I just watched. Every movement. The way he held the mug, the way he didn't meet anyone's eyes. It wasn't shyness, it was deliberate. After he sat at his usual table, I went to the back door. It was unlocked. I'd been religiously checking it, locking it after every customer, but I must have forgotten, or hadn't I? I couldn't remember the last 5 times I'd actually checked, just the feeling of checking, like going through the motions. And there was another rose petal, dried, brittle, the same shade of crimson. This time it was tucked into the keyhole of the antique key. I called the police. Finally. Not about the photo, not about the petal, just about the unlocked door. A possible break-in attempt. A young officer came, polite but bored. He dusted for prints, found nothing usable. He asked if anything was missing. I said no. He suggested I reinforce the lock. I nodded, thanked him, and felt utterly stupid. That evening, I decided to be proactive. I went home and changed the locks on my apartment, every single one. It felt good, taking control. Stupidly good. I even bought a security system, a cheap one, but something. When I got to the coffee shop the next morning, there was a small package on the counter. No note. Inside was a tin of Earl Grey tea, my grandmother's favorite. I hadn't told anyone about my grandmother, not recently. I hadn't even thought about her in months. It hit me then. He wasn't stalking an ex. He was researching me, building a profile. He must have talked to people. Old neighbors, maybe? It was still creepy, still invasive, but at least it was explainable. A weird, elaborate attempt at what? Connection. It was disturbing, but I could work with disturbing. I could avoid him. I could be careful. Then I noticed the sugar packets, arranged on the counter, spelling out a single letter, K. The K just sat there, among the equal sweeteners and the stevia. It wasn't aggressive, not like the photograph or the unlocked door. It was deliberate, like he was testing me, seeing if I'd notice. I started to avoid looking at him directly and pretended to be engrossed in my phone whenever he was nearby. It felt ridiculous, like playing a childish game, but it was all I could think of. Then the invitations started. Small things at first. Have you tried the blueberry muffins? They're new. Or, there's a jazz night at the Blue Moon on Friday. I think you'd enjoy it. Always polite, always innocuous, always from him. I just offer a quick smile and a no thank you and turn away. I started taking different routes to work, just to avoid walking past his usual table. I talked to Sarah, my coworker. Again, she said I was overreacting. He probably just has a crush on you. An awkward one, sure, but harmless. I wanted to believe her. It made sense. An awkward crush explained the muffins, the jazz night, even the tea. It didn't explain the other things, but I didn't tell her about those. I didn't want to sound crazy. The last invitation was different. He asked if I wanted to join him for a walk after work. Just to stretch our legs, he said. It wasn't the offer itself. It was the way he looked at me. No smile, just expectant. And I realized then he wasn't trying to impress me. He was already including me in his life, assuming I'd say yes. Now, I have a rule. I don't accept invitations from people I haven't known for years. Not even for coffee. Not even if they seem harmless. It's cost me a lot. Honestly, friendships, opportunities, I've become distant, but it's worth it every single time. I still go to that coffee shop. I see him sometimes. He doesn't try to talk to me anymore. He just watches. And I always check the sugar packets, even when I'm not there. I ask Sarah to text me a picture of the counter, just to be sure, because I still don't understand why his name starts with a K.